the old god hints at Dragonflight and the possibility of them actually returning, don't you think it is at least a little bit suspicious that a minion of theirs all of a sudden returns as cleansed? And the only way we know he was cleansed is that he actually told us. As you may know, Deathwing, Nefarian, Onyxia as 100% corrupt dragons managed to play an incredibly convincing character as they had infiltrated the Alliance and then they caused chaos from within. Just like how his siblings did it, Sabellian personally also had a human form and did the exact same thing. How likely is that Sabellian is doing this once again and his ultimate goal is to become the Black Dragon aspect so that he can in the end unleash all of the old gods upon us and open a way for a Void Lord invasion? As you may have seen, the entire Wrathion vs Sabellian dynamic has been a pretty significant part of Dragonflight, and really, it is in all reality just a way for Blizzard to animate the audience, similar to the entire Sylvanas Loyalists versus the Rebels that happened back in BFA, and I'm guessing by the end of this expansion, this entire ordeal is going to end in much the same way as the Sylvanas thing, with one side actually being the bad guys, and everyone that supported that side kinda regretting it. Now, if you want a real detailed info on who might be a better choice, Sabellian or Wrathion, I have an entire video covering their lore, all the pros and cons. However, the main point of this entire thing and the topic of this video is the actual corruption, which is a prerequisite for the reformation of the Black Dragonflight. I mean, sure, Sabellian has some pros that Wrathion doesn't have, but the thing with Wrathion is that we are a lot more certain that he has been cleansed from the old god corruption, as we had seen his egg, he was influenced by magic, he was recently born, and we had seen him actually fighting N'Zoth by our side. On the other hand, Sabellian is just a completely different side of the story. He's actually pretty old, he was a black dragon even before the corruption. However, he was corrupted just as Neltharion was, and he was Deathwing's trusted lieutenant, so really, he was as bad as Deathwing. Even the entire reason he was in Outland for nearly 30 years is because he followed Deathwing's orders and he worked quite closely with the old horde. Now, back in Outland, back in DBC, when we had visited him, he was still kinda corrupted, although much more reasonable than some just old god brainwashed dragon. However, ever since that point, we have not heard anything of him since. Sabellian never thought to return to Azeroth when we had the Cataclysm, when we had the Legion invasion, the entire Sylvanas and the Shadowlands ordeal, and now, all of a sudden, as the Dragon Isles mysteriously were discovered out of the blue, he was cleansed. I don't know about you, but to me, this is just 101,000% suspicious. Keep in mind, the only true argument for his supposed cleansing was that the guy literally told us he was cleansed, and apparently it happened because he was on a different planet that had no old god influence, and that kind of split the connection as he was there for decades. The thing is though, if that really was the case and if the old gods now returned, what is to say that he would not fall under their sway just as easily as he had uncorrupted himself and his followers? If you guys could follow the recent news, there has been a lot of hints about the old gods returning. At the moment, there are still of course very early hints, but we have a pretty probable, very likely scenario where we could see the return of all the old gods, and we might even see the actual Void Lord invasion or an old god invasion that never happened since the formation of the Black Empire hundreds of thousands of years ago. Keep in mind, we had recently defeated Sargeras, who, while he was evil, was also the only major force that prevented the Void Lords from expanding, and also from, interestingly enough, reaching Azeroth. Seeing that we celebrated that victory and he had been imprisoned, literally, what is currently stopping the Void Lords from focusing all their efforts and just launching a major Void invasion on our planet? Not only can they come from the outside, but they also got the old gods on the planet still, and a bunch of their agents all over the place. Now, keep in mind, if that is really happening behind the scenes and we are set for a Void invasion, wouldn't now be the best time for the Void Lords to gather all their assets in one place and to send them to set the ground for the upcoming big invasion? The Legion did this exact same thing with Kel'Thuzad and the Lich King. Why wouldn't the old gods do this with a minion of theirs, Sabellian? They know he has a claim. There are a few remaining black dragons out there, and he has a very high chance of actually becoming a black dragon aspect. If he managed to get the powers and then was empowered by the old gods on top of that, he would be able to eliminate all the aspects which would significantly weaken the defenses of Azeroth and would easily set the ground for the old gods to establish their new Black Empire. Of course, we can't really say this for certain, but there are definitely some hints. First thing is, the dragons are incredibly intelligent and they also are able to shapeshift into various forms. We had seen Deathwing himself doing this as he turned into the human Lord Devil Prestor and just started wreaking havoc directly within the Alliance of Lordaeron. Furthermore, we can see the exact same scenario with Onyxia, who roleplayed as a stormy noblewoman. Lady Katrana Prestor did almost manage to wrestle control over the entire kingdom of Stormwind. She manipulated the conflict with the Stormmasons, indirectly getting the queen killed and creating the Defiance Brotherhood. She almost got rid of King Variant Rin and took over the entire alliance. On the other side, we had another black dragon, Wrathion, who also did a similar thing as he disguised himself as a human noble. So literally, just think about this logically. These three dragons, including Deathwing himself, the Destroyer, were all corrupted, and yet they managed to 100% hide their corruption and to play as someone else so they can attack from within and accomplish their actual goals. Now, Sabellian himself is literally a son of Deathwing, Wrathion and Onyxia are his siblings, and even more importantly, he also roleplayed as a human back in the day, known as Baron Sabellian. So this guy literally has first-hand experience at hiding his corruption and pretending to be someone else while trying to do something that only he knows about. So literally, what is to say that instead of cosplaying as Baron Sabellian, Sabellian is just pretending to be the uncorrupted Sabellian, an uncorrupted version of himself, and is trying to get into our good graces so that he can ultimately set free the old gods and open the way for the Void Invasion and the Hour of Twilight that his father also wanted to accomplish. Sure, there is also the entire part of the story that he wants to get the black dragons to what they were in the past, but who even really knows what is the truth at this point and the way with the current lore is? We just learned that the original dragons, the apparent good ones, the uncorrupted ones, were really just Titan servants doing the Titan's bidding on Azeroth, and they did quite a few not so nice things. We also learned that Deathwing had wielded the Void before his so-called corruption, so who knows whether he was even corrupted in the true sense of the word. Seeing that he is the aspect of Earth, I feel like he knew something that none of us know, and by extension, Sabellian was also aware of this fact, and he may still believe that this is the true goal, and that getting the dragons to be the protectors of Titan influence may not really be the right thing. Now, decent evidence for this theory is that while we do have a choice to choose between Wrathion and Sabellian, do you notice that Sabellian is nowhere to be found, and Wrathion is all over the loading screen and a bunch of just promotional artwork all over the place. Of course, this is not hard proof, as we had that guy from Eldraxis and the Shadowlands on the loading screen the entire time, and he was literally as useless as it gets, but this could regardless be a pretty decent point. The only decent counter argument to this is that I feel like Wrathion has like a fifth sense for old god corruption in dragons, so I feel like he would notice this immediately. However, I could totally see this being a relevant plotline in the future. They're battling each other who is going to take over the Dragonflight. Wrathion comes off with proof of his corruption, but no one actually trusts him because people think he's just jealous and he's just trying to undermine him so that he can be the leader. Regardless, if we really are set for a Void Lord old god invasion, Sabellian would literally be the perfect asset and an interesting plot twist as well, so I could totally see him being sent by the old gods to accomplish their goals, and his true allegiance is only going to be something we're going to learn later down the line. What I feel like could also be possible is that he may not actually be lying and he is actually 100% uncorrupted due to his distance from the old gods on a different planet, but now that he has been on Azeroth for a while and they somehow start breaking free from the ground, they might start also taking control over his mind. So while Sabellian may have originally come to Azeroth to restore the Black Dragonflight, he would unwillingly succumb to their influence and would become an old god agent. Thank you for watching. Check out the possible return of the Elemental Lords in Dragonflight by clicking on the screen, and check out the Notes Academy for videos of real-world history. See you next time.